lemon butter cake. If you've ever wondered why this can sometimes be called pound cake, I'll tell you at the end. So what we need for this is plain flour, also known as all-purpose flour, salt, baking powder, cornstarch, baking soda, cream cheese. We're going to need butter, 3 whole sticks of butter. You'll need vanilla. Now, I'm using the fake vanilla, and I have the clear one right now, only because at the time I thought that was all of the vanilla that I had. Later on, I did scrounge up some colored imitation vanilla. Feel free to use the real thing. It's just more expensive. You'll need granulated sugar, a whole lemon. I'll tell you more about the orange later. And you'll need 6 eggs. Now, none of this includes the glaze that we're going to make at the end because there's different kinds of variations. All right, as for our tools, you will need 2 standalone mixing bowls. Make them good size ones. You'll need a silicone spatula. You'll need a sieve. Now, if you don't have a sieve, you can still make this if you have a wire whisk. But a sieve will be infinitely superior in terms of speed and function. You'll need a 1-cup measuring cup as well as a teaspoon. You'll also need a bundt cake. Now, this is the standard 10-cup bundt pan. Unlike with some other shapes of cake pans, with the bundt pan, you can just perfectly substitute a 12-cup bundt pan instead. Because the only difference between the 10 and the 12 cup is the height. What you can't do is substitute an 8 or a 6-inch or 6-cup bundt pan, and you can't substitute other shapes. At least not for this recipe with the leavening ingredients and the time that I have. You'll also need a stand mixer with its own bowl and the paddle attachment. If you do not have a stand mixer, you can use a hand mixer with a third mixing bowl. It's just going to take more time, and you really can't do this by hand and get the same results. We'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, so we're going to start with 3 cups of plain flour or all-purpose flour. Now, I got this into the bowl not by scooping with my 1-cup measuring cup, but rather by fluffing up the flour in the bag and then dipping my spoon in teaspoon by teaspoon and filling the cup. Now, if you scoop it up in the bag, you're going to get typically about 20% too much flour, and that's going to result in a heavy and dense cake, not what we want with too much flour. So be sure to fluff up the flour and then measure it by spooning it in. And so we needed a total of 3 cups. And then we're going to add 1 teaspoon of baking powder. I do prefer the Rumford brand. We're going to add 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda. It said that baking soda has a shelf life of about 6 months after being opened. I find that it's a little closer to 3 or 4 months. When in doubt, you can always take a pinch of your baking soda and add it to a teaspoon of vinegar. And if you see it bubble up, that means your baking soda is still active. As with your flour and other things, make sure that you're keeping your baking soda in a place where it's not going to absorb strong flavors. In other words, don't keep it in your Indian spice and curry blend cabinet, because it absorbs scents very well. And then we're also going to add 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Now, that amount of salt is based on you using salted butter, which I almost always use salted butter. If you are not using salted butter, you'll want to use a full teaspoon of salt here. And then we're also going to add 3 teaspoons, or ultimately that will be a tablespoon, of cornstarch. Cornstarch will make your cake lovely and soft and velvety. If you've ever wondered why things like chicken or thinly cut slices of flank steak or beef at a Chinese restaurant are nice and soft and velvety, it's because they give it a light coating of cornstarch before they cook it up in the pan. Cornstarch has a ton of uses for baking and frying and cooking and everything. So we're going to sift those dry ingredients into a second bowl. Sifting, if you've watched other cake videos here, has at least three purposes. One is to make sure that all of the ingredients are well incorporated. Two is to aerate the flour and the other dry ingredients. And aeration is what helps your cake to rise. We're adding baking powder and baking soda and those things because they trap air into our cake batter, but we can also add our own air in there. At minimum, you should be sifting once, but a lot of professional bakers will sift 2, 3, 4, even 5 times. You can use a whisk. You're gonna whisk, and whisk some more, and just when you think you're done, you're gonna need to whisk even more. If you don't have a sieve like this. And then the third purpose of using a sifter is that you'll find little tiny clumps of, as you can see, they're like little clumps of flour. Now we're going to be able to use our spoon and push those through the sieve and avoid clumps in our batter. All right, now that we've sifted our dry ingredients, we're going to add to our stand mixer 3 sticks of butter. This is a great time to say that all of my ingredients are at room temperature. I left them out the night before so that I could make this. Set aside the 3 packets that the butter was wrapped in. You're going to use that. And we're going to add to these 3 sticks of butter, little by little, probably in a total of, I don't know, 6 or 7 additions, 2 3/4 of a cup of sugar. Now, you really will benefit from a stand mixer here. We're going to start just for a few seconds to break up the butter on a lower speed, but we're going to move up to a medium to high speed for an entire 5 minutes. And this is called creaming butter and sugar. The reason that cake mixes, the instant cake mixes became popular is because a lot of people didn't really realize what they were doing wrong, why their cakes were not light and fluffy when they were butter cakes. And it's because this step was either skipped or what just wasn't done nearly long enough. Creaming butter and sugar doesn't just mean a quick mix until it looks like it's pretty much well blended. It is a 5-minute process on medium to high speed. And if you're using a hand mixer, you're looking at closer to 7 or maybe even 8 minutes of time. And yes, this can be done by hand, but you're not going to do it. I know I'm not going to do it. In the Victorian era, even then ladies didn't do it. They had like a special crank to do this. So you really need the right tools for the job. Most videos that show cake baking, they'll say cream the butter and sugar. They won't really explain how long you need to do it, and they won't really show this process so that you can get an idea for what does creamed butter and sugar look like at the front end, the beginning stage, the middle stage, and the end stage. I'm going to give you an idea for how that's going to look all throughout the 5-minute process. This is a great time, probably at least twice, maybe 3 times during this process, to use your silicone spatula and scrape down the bottom and the sides of the bowl. And again, a full 5 minutes at least of whipping up this butter and sugar and creaming it together until it becomes something light and fluffy and really aerated. This is yet another aspect of adding air to our cake batter so that it will rise really nicely. It won't be heavy and dense. And I think I added my sugar probably in about 5 or 6 additions. Now you can set your timer on your microwave or your egg timer in your kitchen. 5 minutes is the time that you need. And this is a great time to start preparing your bundt pan. Now remember that I said that we have our 3 wrappers from our butter. We're going to use those and the residual butter that remains on them to coat the inside of our bundt pan. And this buttering and flouring of our pan is going to prevent the cake from sticking. It's even more important in a larger cake rather than a layer cake, because buns are a lot more likely to stick. The more intricate the design of your bundt pan, the more important it is that you undertake this butter and flour step. Now, this is the ideal time to do this. You don't want to do it too early, because especially if your kitchen is warm or it's a warm day or you just live in a warm climate, then the butter is going to be completely absorbed by the flour that you're next about to dust. And so it will lose the non-stick capability in the pan. But if you do it too late, when your batter is already mixed, when the active ingredients like the baking powder and baking soda have already been activated by the wet ingredients, then you're going to be missing out on the rising power of those ingredients in your batter when they should be in the oven. So you won't get as much rise out of your cake as if your batter has to sit and wait. So this is the ideal time to butter and flour your cake pan. You have that 5 minutes while your butter and sugar is creaming. Take advantage of it. We do not want to use oil. I have seen people use non-stick cooking sprays on cake pans. Please don't do that. That will break down the non-stick coating on your cake pan. And if you have a Nordic Ware pan like this one is, it will void the warranty. Now, Nordic Ware does advise that you can use a spray like Baker's Joy that has the like a butter-like spray that will not damage the coating along with the flour in the spray. I've never liked those. I find that the nozzle gets clogged up too often with the flour, and it's just not really worth it. I already know I'm probably going to have a butter packet that I can rub on my cake pan, and I know I'm going to have flour. So it's another kitchen product that I don't really need. I try to stay away from products or gadgets that aren't useful to me. I don't want to be redundant. So here's what a perfectly buttered and floured bundt pan looks like. And we can now set this aside, and we're just going to do the last bit of prep. Now, as I said, this is a lemon butter cake, but it doesn't have to be a lemony flavored cake. I recommend that with any butter cake, or what we would traditionally call pound cake, that you zest some lemon zest into it. And that's just because with all of the rich ingredients that we are going to have in here, butter and cream cheese and the eggs, you need something to cut through that a little bit and make it a little more bright and fresh. So the zest of an entire lemon will do that. Make sure that when you zest the lemon, and I used the finest grating side on my grater, that you're only getting the yellow part. Don't grate down past the yellow to the white part, which is called the pith that is bitter. We just want the bright, zesty, lemony flavor, citrus. Now you could stop there, and you could use the juice of this lemon for another day, for another recipe. I recommend that at minimum, you use at least, on top of this lemon zest, an additional half of the lemon for the juice. And that's even if you don't particularly want a lemon cake. You could instead do a caramel glaze or even a chocolate glaze on this cake, and you'd still want to use at least, I will say, half of a lemon plus the full lemon zest will be perfect. It's not going to come through nearly as much as you might think. Also, if you wanted to do a chocolate glaze drizzle on your cake, you could just use the zest of one lemon, and then you could use the zest of an entire orange. And if you love Lindt chocolate bars, you know that a bittersweet chocolate and orange, that's a great combination. But I'm not doing that today. I want something that is a little more lemon forward. Actually, a lot more lemon forward. So I am zested the entire lemon, and I'm not just going to use a half of the lemon juice. I'm going to use an entire lemon's juice here. All right, so I'm going to do the last little bit of whipping of my butter and sugar. And in goes my lemon juice. In goes my cream cheese. And remember, I said all of these ingredients were left out on my counter in my kitchen overnight. So the cream cheese is at room temperature. It's going to beat in perfectly easily. We also don't want a cold batter, right? Which is what cold ingredients would give us, besides not mixing in nice and evenly. The longer it takes for our batter to get hot in the oven, the more uneven our cake may bake. I honestly don't even remember what I was talking about here. Sorry, I think I was talking to Eric about something. So we're now getting to the stage where there is about to be a potential to overbeat the things that we add in. So it's really important that these things are well evenly mixed. Um, I did end up scraping the sides down. You may notice I stopped the recording for that. Okay, and I don't know if you can see it there, but I just added, I found some colored imitation vanilla in my baking cabinet. I added a total of 2 teaspoons of vanilla flavor. America's Test Kitchen did a poll of a bunch of people, just blind taste testing. And it turns out that unless the vanilla is truly the star of the show, you probably don't need to shell out for real vanilla. So, vanilla bean paste or things like that that cost so much. Our current price is $11 at Walmart for one individual Madagascar vanilla bean. You can pay for that if you want to. I'm not paying for that. So 2 teaspoons of the fake vanilla extract. And then we're going to start adding our egg yolks one by one. Or not egg yolks, our whole eggs. And I crack them into a bowl separately so that just in case any shell should happen to meet with the egg, it's easy to fish it out because you'll never see it in that pale colored batter if you drop it in there. Eggs absolutely can be overbeaten, so we really only need a few revolutions of our paddle attachment for each egg, each of the 6 eggs. Now, I have some Walmart eggs, which are the white ones here, and then I have some brown ones, which are organic and pasture raised eggs. And in a moment, I'm going to break them into the bowl side by side so that you can see the difference in how they look. I've never been a huge proponent of organic fruits and vegetables in the United States, only because there is a ton of lying that happens with trickery of words in the US. Like, for example, those strawberries that you buy, they can say that they're organic, but to legally label those strawberries as organic, all the farmer has to do is say that there was no reasonable, practical way for them to have fought that pest or that fungus or whatever it was with organic means. And they can put that on there and they're good to go. It's just, oh, there wasn't an option. There was no way for us to fight it. Monoculture is the reason that they cannot fight things in natural ways. So I'm just not going to pay more for that trickery. On the other hand, when it comes to eggs, there is a huge difference between the Walmart standard eggs and truly pasture raised organic eggs, like, for example, Vital Farms. You're going to see a big difference, and you will taste a big difference. Side note, this was 6 large eggs. It doesn't make that much of a difference to use large versus extra large, but I don't recommend that you use jumbo eggs. Now, the pale yellow egg is the Walmart egg, and the dark egg is the organic pasture raised. I'm sure you could see a big difference there. Okay, now that those eggs got incorporated one by one, the last step is to incorporate our flour batter or flour mixture. Now, if you know anything about cakes, you know why that is. It's because flour develops gluten. We don't want a chewy cake, so we're just going to spoon this into our batter in probably 3 separate additions. We're only going to have a few revolutions of the paddle attachment each time, just until mixed. We use our paddle attachment for a couple of revolutions, and then we will wrap things up with our silicone spatula. Okay, and we've poured this into our bundt pan. Be aware that recipes designed for bundt pans are going to be much thicker in consistency than the batter that you may be used to for, let's say, a recipe that's meant for 2 8-inch cake pans. This is a thick batter. I don't recommend that you take this bundt pan and smack it against the top of the counter to get air bubbles out. That works for thinner batters. I don't recommend this with such a thick batter. It will just deflate the batter overall. Use the back of your spatula to kind of smooth things out. You're going to bake this at 350 degrees. Every oven is different. My oven, this took 52 minutes. I think this is a good time to say that you may notice that there is a tiny bit of doming on this cake. If you use a dark bundt pan, you're going to get much more doming, as I think is probably the case with all dark pans. And that's because darker pans are going to absorb more heat. The part of the batter that is closest to the sides of the pan is going to absorb heat and cook faster, whereas what's normally in the center of the pan is going to cook the slowest, and so that is going to end up rising last, causing a dome. And a lot of people find that unattractive and they want to cut that off. That's cake material wastage. We don't want that. And it also means an uneven cooking. So uneven baking. So that means the cake that touches the sides, the pan, will be dry potentially while the center of the cake is still undone. So for your most even baking, I recommend that you choose light color pans, like the very, very light silver. Nordic Ware has this rose gold color, which I would still count as light, and then they also have the gold. All of those are light. I don't recommend that you use any dark pans. There are a few exceptions, and I'm going to talk about that with you when we make the banana brownies or banownies, or I'm not even sure what I'm calling them yet. So this took 52 minutes in my oven. Every oven is a little different. I'm going to let this cool on a wire rack because that allows heat to get to all sides of the cake, including the bottom, and it's going to allow it to cool as quickly as possible. I want this pan to cool off because I can't take it out of the pan immediately. The pan is still really, really hot. If I were to try to take this cake out now, the cake would fall apart. But if I wait too long, that is also something that can cause the cake to stick to the pan due to the formation of sugars just liquefying at the bottom, what would be the top when you invert the cake. So your sweet spot with most bundt pans is going to be about 12 minutes. I recommend that you reset your timer for 12 minutes once your alarm goes off and you remove the cake from the oven and put it on this wire rack. Wire racks are a great cooking tool. I got this at the dollar store. If you don't have one, ask a friend or a neighbor. Most people have one. Adults have one. Older adults have one, let me say. And so we're just going to let this cool for 12 minutes. You can start to slide a spatula and like just kind of work it out of the pan and invert it. In the meantime, we're going to go ahead and start to make an icing or a glaze for this cake. As I said, you could totally just you could leave this cake plain. It'll be really good. You could mix up a little confectioner's sugar with a tiny pinch of salt and a tiny splash of milk. A little goes a long way. You can always add more milk. You can't take away. So go slowly with that. And then just do confectioner's sugar icing glaze. That'll be great. You could take a little bittersweet chocolate or milk chocolate and mix that with a little cream, heavy cream, put that in the microwave. And, once you get a drizzling consistency, you put enough heavy cream in for that. You can just drizzle that on. I recommend that when you use confectioner's sugar, that you do use a sieve because, as you can see, it gets really rocky in there. That's not going to make for a nice smooth icing. Now, if you want to do what I did, I wasn't even quite sure at this moment as I was making this what I was going to do. I thought that I would just use some confectioner's sugar, a tiny splash of milk. Again, adding little by little. You can't take away milk, so just add slowly. And then some, a pinch of salt. What I ended up doing, however, is adding that confectioner's sugar and milk mix to some of my own lemon curd to make a really, really lemon forward flavored glaze. I'll show you another day how to make lemon curd. An incredible number of people get lemon curd wrong. And I'll tell you how to determine a recipe that's wrong. It tells you to use whole eggs in lemon curd. We do not use whole eggs in lemon curd. That would cause your eggs to set. We use lemon yolks because that makes for a rich, like a sauce, not something set. And I've seen recipe videos in which whole eggs were called for and maybe only one or two people had actually made the recipe. And it was so sad to hear them say, I don't know what I did wrong. It came out all right. It tastes so eggy. I don't know what I did wrong. Yeah, it's because you used the egg white. The egg cooked and set. We don't have people who are recipe testing anymore. That is to say, sending out recipes for other people to try in other environments or situations and making sure that they will work. And to those commenters who actually tried the recipe and said, I don't know what I did wrong, it tasted really eggy, they never got a response, I noticed, in the couple of videos that I saw, as well as the recipe for lemon curd that I saw on the Food Network. Even the Food Network got it wrong. How shameful. So I don't have a measurement on that. I just kind of did it by consistency and by eye. Confectioner sugar, a little splash of milk, and my own lemon curd. Like I said, I'll show you another day a recipe for lemon curd. It's getting really expensive to buy that at the grocery store, so I'll show you how to make that at home. Even with the high price of eggs these days, it's still cheaper to make it yourself. Now, to the final question. Why was this type of cake previously called a pound cake? Somebody asked me that the other day. It's because you typically used a pound of each ingredient. A pound of butter, a pound of flour, a pound of sugar. More and more home cooks do not have scales anymore. So that word is just not really as relevant, or that term I should say. But yeah, that's why they called it that. I don't love the name pound cake also. I feel like it sounds old-fashioned. So I'm just calling this a lemon butter cake. This is, like I said, this is really infinitely customizable. Feel free to not use any lemon juice and to only use the zest of a lemon, or only maybe use juice of half of a lemon. And why not try, I don't know, for fall flavors, you can go with cinnamon cardamom added to your confectioner sugar for a glaze. You could try just like I said, just plain confectioner sugar. You could just eat the cake plain. It's all really good. Caramel glaze, chocolate glaze. I hope that you try this. This cake will get you a lot of happy diners. Take care.